Welcome to On Health with Houston Methodist. I'm Zach Moore. I'm a photographer and editor here, and I'm also a longtime podcaster.
I'm Katie McCallum, former researcher turned health writer, mostly writing for our blogs.
And Katie, do you know about seed oils?
I really hadn't heard of this concept or terminology until a couple months ago.
Okay, good.
Yeah, maybe. I saw something on Instagram that was like, seed oils are bad for you. And I was like, what are seed oils?
Okay, usually I feel like, I'm a little maybe one step behind of this scientific stuff and you guys are ahead of me on this stuff. But I feel good now knowing that we found out about it at around the same time.
Yeah, I will say I had for not a long time, but many years heard that canola oil wasn't particularly great for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I had switched to olive oil for that reason, but I had no idea it was quote unquote a seed oil.
Yeah.
So then when I went to go look up what seed oils were, I was like, oh, okay, I have heard things questioning canola oil. So let me look into this. And yeah, I still don't really know if they're actually bad for me. Let's put it that way.
Right. Do you use a lot of oil in your cooking at home or anything like that?
Yes, we do. So we really do try to not use a lot of butter.
Mm-hmm.
And we substitute olive oil for pretty much any kind of anytime a recipe calls for butter, we'll sub for olive oil.
Pour that in the pan before you cook something, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Kind of depends what we're cooking. I do use canola oil and safflower oil and stuff if we're doing a stir fry. Once you turn the heat up kind of high, you can't use olive oil anymore.
Smoke point, very important statistic we'll talk about later.
Yeah. And so in those cases, we don't use or on the grill, you cannot use olive oil.
Right.
We use avocado oil on the grill. I buy olive oil at, the big box stores in the large volumes and
mass quantities.
Yeah, we buy a lot of it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Like you, making a micro shift towards, this is healthier than butter. So whenever, in the old days, quote unquote old days, I would just slice off a piece of butter and put it in the pan. It has a certain taste to it that's nice sometimes.
Oh, no.
Look, the butter.
Arguably.
Warming up some tortillas, that sort of thing, right? But no, now I usually just put in a drip of olive oil.
And I also don't even know if canola oil, olive oil, are they better than butter? They probably are. But, you hear about a lot of restaurants not wanting to use seed oils now.
Right.
And so you do start to wonder. So anyways, I'm glad we're talking about this because whenever I go to look, I'm always kind of confused by what I'm reading. So it's nice to hear it straight from the source.
Yeah, seed oils have really become this boogeyman of health and diet right now.
Yeah.
And we talked to one of our experts, senior registered dietitian Amanda Beaver. She's been on the podcast a few times. So had a good time talking to her again about seed oils and what to know about them. Thanks so much for being on the podcast again with us, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
And we're here to talk about something that is a hot topic in health circles and dietitian circles, maybe, seed oils.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had never heard of seed oils until probably a few months ago, and it was all bad things, that they're toxic, that they're responsible for the rise in chronic illnesses like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, etc. So first off, can you define for us what seed oils are?
It's kind of used as an umbrella term for the oils that come from safflower seeds, soybeans, sunflower, safflower, canola.
Okay.
Those are some of the most common ones that we'll see in our foods. And what all of these oils have in common is that they're rich in omega-6 fats, which we'll talk about more in a second. But there are some outliers that I like to bring up. So technically, flax oil or flaxseed oil is a seed oil, but it often doesn't get lumped into the same negative category with all the other seed oils.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another outlier too, and it's called high oleic sunflower oil, which you can definitely find on food labels if you're ever scanning them. And this is a type of sunflower oil that's rich in monounsaturated fats. So it's going to be a little bit different too from a lot of these other seed oils that I just mentioned. With this topic, there's a lot of nuance that we need to go through here. And I think seed oils have been painted as either all good or all bad, depending on which side you're on. And this is an oversimplification. So to kind of start off, I wanted to go through the three main reasons why people feel like seed oils are potentially detrimental, and we'll kind of break it down a little bit. So the first reason why seed oils are often cited as bad, and probably the most common reason, are that they are going to be rich in omega-6 fats.
Okay.
And our body, when we ingest these omega-6 fats, a small amount of them are going to be turned into something called arachidonic acid, which is a little bit pro-inflammatory. It's considered pro-inflammatory.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about that later too, but that's probably the number one reason that these are cited as bad for us. And the second reason is that these seed oils are more highly processed, but that can be both a good thing and a bad thing. So the good thing about them being more highly processed is that they have those solids removed, so they have a higher smoke point, meaning they're not going to smoke at as low of a temperature. So we can cook them to hotter temperatures. One downside of that is, in order to get them to that point, we have to use heat and chemical solvents to extract these impurities from these seed oils. And a small amount of these chemical solvents will remain in the oil, a very small amount, and it is believed to be still safe, but some of it is going to remain. And it is thought that when we cook with that oil, some of it will dissipate, so that's good too. But that's probably the second biggest reason that seed oils are cited as something that's bad for us. And then the third reason why people cite seed oils as something that's potentially detrimental, which I feel like isn't talked about as often, is due to the fact that it's rich in double bonds. So omega-6 fats are polyunsaturated fats, and what that means is they've got a lot of double bonds. And the reason that this can be a bad thing when we're heating oils and cooking them to high temperatures is that at these high temperatures, they can start to oxidize and break down. And when they oxidize, they can lead to byproducts that aren't good for our health. And so oils that are naturally rich in these double bonds, our omega-6s and our seed oils, they are going to be more likely to have that oxidation happen when we're cooking them at higher temperatures, even though they do have a higher smoke point.
So as you said, seed oils are generally higher in omega-6s, but we need these oils, right? And our bodies don't produce them themselves. So I guess it's a matter of like, how much do we need, and these potentially giving us too much.
Yes. So with omega-6s, and I think this is a good time to talk about omega-6s and omega-3s too.
Let's do it.
So these are what we call essential fatty acids. And you can kind of think of them the same way that you think about proteins, like just like how maybe you've heard that there are essential amino acids for proteins. These are our protein building blocks that our body can't make itself. We have the same thing with fats. So these are essential fatty acids. Our body cannot make them itself. So we need to get these omega-3s and omega-6s from our diet. They're essential. However, one thing I will say though is that with these omega-6s, it doesn't have to come from seed oils. They are naturally going to be found in things like pumpkin seeds, tofu, eggs. So you can get them in a lot of foods. You don't have to get them from cooking oils.
So if you have a well-balanced diet, you're probably getting what you need already. You don't have to go seek it out somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yes. You do not have to seek these out to make sure you're getting your omega-6s. It's very easy to meet your needs for this.
Okay. And omega-3s as well, or?
Omega-3s can be a little bit harder to meet because they're not rich in quite as many foods. So think things like flax seeds, walnuts, salmon, trout, sardines. Those are going to be our foods rich in omega-3s. Anytime we eat these omega-6 fats, our body is going to make a small amount of them into arachidonic acid. So even if we're eating them from the foods I just mentioned, like tofu or eggs or pumpkin seeds. And so the concern is that if we're getting a ton of these omega-6 fatty acids from seed oils, that we will start to tip that balance a little bit and produce more arachidonic acid, which is considered pro-inflammatory. So with this compound, it does have very important functions in the body, and it does help with brain development, brain function. So it is needed. But we don't want, the concern is that there will be too much of it being produced. And I do want to contrast that to our omega-3 fats. So our body, when we ingest those, so when we eat foods like salmon or our flax seeds or walnuts, a small amount of those fats are going to be turned into EPA or DHA, which is kind of like that final end product of omega-3s. And EPA and DHA are very anti-inflammatory. So that's kind of where a lot of this controversy comes from, is when you contrast those two, black and white, like, yes, EPA and DHA are a lot more anti-inflammatory and are good for us.
Amanda mentioned two important omega-3 fatty acids you might not be too familiar with, EPA and DHA. These help with everything from brain function to heart, joint, and eye health. They're essential, meaning your body needs them, but you can't make them on your own, so you'll want to be sure you're getting them through your diet. How much of these fatty acids do you need? For most adults, the sweet spot is around 250 to 500 milligrams combined each day. You'll mostly find EPA and DHA in fatty fish, like salmon and sardines, but they're also found in flaxseed, chia seeds, and walnuts.
Up after the break, more with Amanda about seed oils and which ones might be considered better or worse for you.
From annual checkups to managing chronic conditions, your healthcare should be personalized to you. At Houston Methodist, our primary care doctors provide customized care for you and your family, with more than 40 convenient locations across Greater Houston. We offer a variety of ways to get care, from in-person and virtual appointments to same-day visits when you're sick. Choose your doctor and schedule online at houstonmethodist.org/stayhealthy. Houston Methodist, leading medicine.
There have been so many dietary changes in our society in recent years and decades. So is there like a control test on this? Like, why do seed oils get the blame for this rise in all these chronic diseases? Why are they the bad guy right now?
So I do think there's always going to be a trend for who the bad guy on the block is. And right now, seed oils are very much in the limelight. And there are definitely drawbacks to seed oils, like we discussed. But this kind of speaks to that oversimplification that I was mentioning earlier. So a lot of content creators are citing seed oils as one of the potential causes to the high rates of chronic disease we're seeing, high rates of cancer and type 2 diabetes. And that is very much an oversimplification, because not only, yes, our seed oil intake has gone up over the last few years, but so has our intake of added sugars. We've become more sedentary as a society. We're eating out more. So there's a lot of other factors that we have to take into account that could be driving those increases in chronic diseases that we're seeing. And it is very much an oversimplification to point to seed oils as the culprit, because there's a lot of other factors that are contributing.
Seed oils they're the boogeyman of the month when it comes to
yes. Yeah.
So you talk some about smoke point and oxidation and that sort of thing. What do you recommend then for high heat cooking if, smoke point is a point of potential concern with some of these oils?
Sure. Anytime our oil starts to smoke, just as kind of a side note here, don't use it. Throw it out. So if you're heating up some oil on a pan and it starts to smoke, don't use it. Don't eat it, because that's not good for us. When it starts to smoke, it's producing carcinogens that are going to be detrimental to both ingest and to breathe in.
Okay.
So definitely toss that oil out if you see it smoke, number one.
Great point.
And the second thing that I want to say is with seed oils, like because they are more refined and they have all those impurities and solids removed, they are going to have much higher smoke points. And so that is one reason why proponents of seed oils tout them as a benefit, is that they do have this high smoke point. But one thing we talked about earlier was how the oils that are very rich in double bonds, right, our omega-6s, our polyunsaturated fats, those are more liable to oxidize because those double bonds are more prone to that. Whereas our oils that are much lower in those double bonds are not going to have that be quite as much of an issue. So our monounsaturated fats, things like our olive oil, our avocado oil, those are going to be very low in double bonds, right? Mono means one, poly means multiple. So the oil that I typically recommend for high heat cooking is regular avocado oil. And the reason for that is you'll notice that I didn't say virgin avocado oil or extra virgin avocado oil. And that's because if it is extra virgin or virgin, then it's going to have a lower smoke point. It's going to have some of those solids in it that are going to make it not as good for high heat cooking.
Okay.
So yes, this is a little bit more of a refined avocado oil, but it is still going to have that benefit that it's rich in monounsaturated fats, which are going to be less liable to oxidizing and breaking down when we expose them to high heat.
No, these are some good guidelines, because you go to the oil aisle in the grocery store, and it's kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
Really got to pick up the label and really read it if you want to know what really you're ingesting, what you're getting out of it,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're seeing all kinds of things like cold pressed, virgin, extra virgin, or there's just the regular version. So know that anytime you're seeing those terms like virgin, cold pressed, extra virgin, those are going to be less refined, which can be a good thing, right? But it can be a drawback if you're trying to cook at higher temperatures, because we do not want that oil smoking. That's not a good thing.
So all that being said, what are the best seed oils and what are the worst? Or does it all depend on what you're using them for and how you're using them?
Yes, I think you kind of nailed it with the last part of that question. So it does depend on how much you're having, what you're using them for, how you're using them. And so that's going to really discern whether or not, it's kind of a good idea. So one thing that I've seen over the last few months is if a food has any kind of seed oil on it on the food label, people are tossing it. And that is kind of a drawback that I wanted to point out, just because there might be other redeeming qualities of that food, and we might be swapping it out for something that's maybe less nutritious for us, which we'll talk about kind of some of the switch over to our beef tallow and our butter here in a moment.
Okay.
But yeah, I would encourage people to, rather than scanning the label and, absolutely avoiding it at all costs if it has any seed oil, to ask themselves first, like, is this a more minimally processed food or is this a highly processed food? Let that be more of their guide for whether or not they should pick it up and add it to their cart. So don't let whether or not there's a seed oil be the ultimate determining factor. Ask yourself, how processed is it? Because that might be a little bit more important.
Yeah, you and I had a whole podcast on ultra processed foods. I recommend everybody go check it out in our back catalog here on Health. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Another thing too is you could ask yourself, is this a food that's been fried or not? That might be a better question to ask yourself too, because we talked about how when these seed oils are cooked at higher temperatures, those double bonds are more likely to oxidize and produce negative byproducts that aren't good for us. So if you're choosing something that maybe there's just a little bit of it in it and it's something that's a cold product, might not be the end of the world. But if you're picking up something that's fried and it's probably been exposed to those higher temperatures, that would not be as good of an option. So I would recommend asking yourself those two questions first. Is it highly processed or not? Is it fried or not? And rather than, does it have a seed oil or not?
Yeah, I think we all know that fried is just intrinsically less healthy than not fried, but that's good to know some of the deeper science over there too. Like, well, this is why. It's not just because it's greasy or
right. It does, like, personally, I don't love when things are fried in like seed oils, just because they are more likely to break down because of all those double bonds. And if you've ever gotten an order of French fries and they've tasted kind of off or almost a little bit rancid, that's a sign that those oils have kind of broken down and oxidized a little bit. And, it's not a good thing. We can taste it. And one of the most common fry oils is canola oil, which does have a very high amount of omega-6s. Does have some omega-3s too. That can make it not super good for frying.
Yeah, I was at a Mexican restaurant not too long ago, and we got a basket of chips, and we're all like, "These taste a little.
These don't taste
little
right.
oily." And the waiter was like, "Oh, sorry," and they brought us a new one. It was fine after that. But I think they knew.
Yeah, they were like,
had a few people sending those baskets of chips back.
This is old oil, or this,
And I love chips, so there's going to be something really wrong tasting with them for me not to finish this basket of chips. So never fun when you take, because you can taste it.
Yeah,
that's your body telling you stop.
Yeah, don't eat this. Yeah, With our different oils, we talked about how the most common fried oil is canola oil. And so there are some drawbacks there that I wanted to bring up. Okay. So canola oil has a lot of omega-6s, but it does have some omega-3s. And our omega-3s are a good thing for us, right? We talked about how they eventually can be turned into things that are anti-inflammatory. But we talked about how when fats are rich in double bonds, they're more likely to oxidize and break down and turn rancid. And so because canola oil does have a lot of those omega-6s and some of those omega-3s, it is going to be more likely to oxidize due to all those double bonds that are found in it. And the same thing is true for soybean oil, which is also a really common fry oil. And it does have a lot of omega-6s and a little bit of omega-3s too, but that is a drawback for frying because that is going to make it more likely to oxidize. Now we can contrast that to something like peanut oil, which technically peanuts aren't a seed, they're a legume in the bean family. But our peanut oil is going to be pretty high in our monounsaturated fats. It has a pretty decent amount of them. It still definitely has omega-6s, but I do feel like with peanut oil, that is one benefit of it, that it doesn't have quite as much of those omega-6s or omega-3s in it that are going to be more liable to oxidizing when we're frying with it or cooking with it at higher heats.
Okay, so peanut oil is kind of a middle ground between these seed oils and your avocado oils and canola oils.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think some of us might know there are definitely some fast food and restaurant chains out there that use peanut oil. And while those aren't a good option for people who have peanut allergies, you know, they do have that benefit of being richer in those monounsaturated fats, which are better for us.
So we hinted at some potential alternatives earlier. Let's explore some of that, like butter versus seed oils, like or at least plant-based oils. Because I've seen studies that show that a higher intake of plant-based oil was associated with a 17% reduction in total mortality. And conversely, those same studies showed high butter consumption was associated with a 15% increase of total mortality. So butter loses?
Yeah, so the study that you're citing is one that used a very large group of people. So whenever studies have a ton of people in them, they're going to be a little bit more highly powered, but the results are going to be more reliable than if it's a smaller study. And so I would kind of take that as like, wow, yeah, this is evidence supporting that our mono and polyunsaturated fats are going to be probably a better option than things like butter and our animal fats.
So are saturated fats good alternative? I've read that some restaurants are replacing seed oils with beef tallow, for example.
Yes. So beef tallow is a saturated fat, and it's very much a trendy fat right now. And there are some popular restaurant chains and fast food chains that are switching over from canola or soybean oil to things like beef tallow. But as we just mentioned that study that showed that we saw that higher risk of mortality when we switch over to some of those more saturated fats for our primary cooking fats, we do see a higher mortality risk. So I think this is more of a sidestep or a step in a worse direction than a step in the right direction.
Interesting.
So think about this more like it's probably not any better for you. It's still a French fry.
Gotcha. You know, you mentioned how beef tallow is a bit of a trend. Another trend I saw is people use beef tallow as a face moisturizer. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So this is another very popular trend. And so for people who have very, very dry skin, it could help a little bit. But beef tallow is considered comedogenic, meaning that it can increase our risk of getting acne. It can kind of trap bacteria and dirt and oils onto our skin. And this is not a good thing for people who are more acne prone. So that's one thing to be on the lookout for.
Well, good to know. I won't be lathering my face in beef tallow. So ultimately, are we looking too micro for problems with seed oils when really the problems are more macro? And any final thoughts on seed oils to leave the listeners with?
Absolutely. So one reason I don't love this kind of trend of seed oils and tossing out all of our products and things that have seed oils is that it's getting a little bit too granular, right? It's making it a very black and white oversimplification. And it's a better idea for our health if we focus more on the bigger picture. So rather than ask yourself, do I have any seed oils in my diet? Ask yourself, am I getting my veggies and my fruits and my nuts and my proteins? And look at kind of your overall eating pattern and how much processed food you're eating, how much you're eating out. Ask yourself those questions because those are going to be more indicative of our health and improve our nutrition than just whether or not it has a seed oil or not.
Gotcha. Well, Amanda, as always, great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for sharing this knowledge, and I look forward to applying it in my never-ending dietary journey.
Thank you.
All right. So great talking to Amanda, as always, especially about this hot topic like seed oils. And one of the many great takeaways from the conversation that I had anyway was, you know what? If you have a product with seed oils in it, you don't have to immediately throw it away. There are things to look for specifically that are in them that you can look out for.
Yeah, I literally wrote down what she said that I'll probably put in a note in my phone. And she basically said, ask first, is it highly processed? So if it's a highly processed snack, that's what matters more than whether there's seed oils in it. We don't want to eat a lot of highly processed snack foods and foods like that. And the second thing she said is it fried or not? So again, focus less on the seed oil part of it and say hey, if this is a fried food, maybe it's not the best choice. If this is highly processed, maybe it's not the best choice. Not really the seed oil part of it, which I think it's good criteria it again brings us back to what actually matters when we're evaluating food, because we have so many options that, you're oversimplifying if you're just focused on whether it's the seed oils.
Smoke point, another thing we talked about. Yes, if your oil starts to smoke, dump that out immediately. That's common sense, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's common sense because sometimes, or I don't think I understood why things were smoking necessarily. You know what I mean? Back in a long time ago. Now that I've been cooking for a long time, so I figured it out more. But if you're new to cooking yourself at home, if it's smoking, it's probably because it's the oil. It's not so much that your pan is too hot. I used to think my pan was too hot and that I needed to turn the heat down.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really solve it either. So you're just using the wrong oil. A couple of weeks ago, we had sesame oil in a really hot pan and our fire detector almost went off.
There it is.
Yeah. And now I understand why. But, I might have back then thought okay, this is just too hot. Let me turn it down. That was never going to help. So no, I appreciated that she kind of walked us through the pro tips of, olive oil is good for you, but it's a pretty low smoke point. So you're not going to be able to use it for everything. And that's when, you'll need to sub for one of these seed oils and things like that. So I thought it was helpful.
Yeah. For me, it was more understanding the science. Okay, now I understand. I knew oh, it's doing this. We can't use that now. But now I kind of really understand why. Yeah.
I had no idea that it was stuff bad for you was forming. I was just oh, it's smoking and I don't want the fire detector to go off. Right. I had no idea that it's now I'm going to be eating carcinogens or something like that. I had not taken it that seriously.
It's more an internal health concern now than I got to turn off my fire.
No, yeah. That's where my head always went.
My fire alarm, absolutely. No, I totally relate to that. Also, seeking out omega. Supplements are always a big point of conversation these days. People seeking out omega pills, things like that. But your body is going to generate, of course, there are always exceptions, but if you have a well-balanced diet, your body's going to take care of itself. You don't need to seek out these things. So you don't need to worry about does this have this much omega, et cetera?
Yeah, it sounds like balanced diet, of course, is kind of the answer. I do think it would be worth us diving into omega-6 fatty acids in particular. From what she said, omega-3s are pretty easy to come by with a balanced diet. But when she was talking about the omega-6, I was like, I could maybe not have enough of that because we don't eat a ton of fish. I would be interested to kind of deep dive into like, okay, this is the more beneficial of the two. They're both good for you. This is the more beneficial one. Like, are you getting enough? And are you sure you're getting enough?
Right.
But yeah, again, healthy diet, you're probably doing okay from that regard. Oversimplification to say that picking a different oil is going to fix any like, downstream health problems coming your way.
Absolutely. So with all this new information that we have, is it going to change your cooking habits at all, Katie?
I think mine are going to stay the same. I just supported that the internet has really tried to cause a lot of confusion about them, and that I think I'm probably doing okay. And it's good to hear from somebody, a registered dietitian, that is the case. So that's how I feel. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of avocado oil already, based off another probably podcast I had with Amanda recommending things. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. And again, even though seed oil is like the boogeyman of the month here, don't go to your pantry and throw everything away. Just, take all the information in, take a nice measured approach. Everything in moderation, as we always say here on Health, right?
Yep.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of On Health with Houston Methodist. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We drop episodes Tuesday mornings. So until next time, stay tuned and stay healthy.